Hi, virtual students. We are here with Unit 1, Part 6, and finishing up this first unit. This is our last part of notes for this particular unit. So, um, if you've been keeping track, you know that the last part of this unit was filling out these. We're going to go to the back side here and fill out this chart as we go. So it's very similar looking to what we did yesterday or the previous unit or part. And here's your kind of column, right? And then you fill along across the rows there. So anyway, let's get started here talking about eventually the economic goals of a economy. Okay, so first things first, go ahead and write in real quick something that you admire about the U.S. economy, and then something that you also do not. So take a second and write something down for those two things. Okay, so some common answers that we get, the admiration of the U.S. economy probably goes back to just the cliche of like being able to accomplish the American dream, and um, again, accomplishing that probably isn't as easy as maybe we would like it to be sometimes. But obviously, everybody does have a shot, right? And as long as you're in it and you're working hard, then you know that you do have a shot to be able to be successful, whatever your definition of successful would be. Now, something that we don't admire about the U.S. economy, a few different things can are usually come about that. Maybe it's not quite as easy as it should be. Maybe there are a whole lot of rules that can be taken advantage of by certain groups of people. And again, it's not necessarily perfect. What I was trying to get you to get to is again, we're going to talk about these economic goals. What are some things that the U.S. focuses on, to try to um, make the economy run as smooth as possible, get as many people bought in on the system as they can. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. There's going to be six total goals here that we talk about. All right. And again, these are things that economies want to accomplish. And some are used a little bit more than others. Some of them take away from other ones. We'll kind of mention that as we go through. But the first economic goal we're mentioning is economic freedom. And that's just the idea that people get to do what they want with their money. And we'll tie that in with like taxation, right? And so there's a concept that if the government taxes people too much, that eventually they'll stop working. It's called the Laffer curve. You don't need to know that, but the idea that eventually if you tax somebody so much, they'll stop working, and then the government loses tax revenue because the tax percentage is too high. We don't know what that percentage is necessarily, and it's probably different for any number of different people. But there is an idea behind that, and so we do want some economic freedom because the idea of being able to, keep the money that you earn. It's kind of a reward for producing stuff. The better you produce stuff, the better your business is, the more money that you'll be able to keep. And keeping that in mind, right? If you can spend that money how you want, right? It gives me more of an incentive to produce more and more stuff, right? If I'm producing stuff and I have to give that money to, well, in this case, the government, I'm not as motivated to make nearly as much money. Okay, so the positives, again, we like the choice. And in terms of what we look at, taxes are lower. However, if the government doesn't collect as much money, they can't provide as much. And we'll tie that into another economic goal here in a little bit. um, but if the government has no revenue, right, they can't provide nearly as much. The next one is we want to be as efficient as possible, meaning that we don't want to waste resources. We learned earlier in the unit about land, labor, capital, the factors of production, natural resources, labor, the labor skills of people, and then like the capital, the tools that we use to produce stuff. We want to be as efficient as possible, meaning that we don't want people to waste their time. We don't want people to waste their skills, right? We definitely don't want to waste natural resources such as, well, especially like like oil, right? We don't want to spill oil everywhere. That's an environmental hazard. It creates more expensive, products and those types of things. So we don't want to do that. We want to be as efficient as possible. And in the United States, we tie economic efficiency in with economic freedom. Basically, we say, hey, listen, the people, they know what they're doing. These businesses know what they're doing. And if they don't know what they're doing, they're not going to be in business long. So they're going to know how to be as efficient as possible. Now, that doesn't mean that the government doesn't have certain rules. And so if you kind of go down to the negatives here, the if there are no rules, okay, and the government just says, "Hey, be as efficient as possible." We kind of use the idea of pollution with like oil spills. But in the 1950s and even before that, especially, you know, businesses, factories weren't regulated on where they polluted, okay, or how they disposed of their waste. And a lot of companies were not cleaning their smoke that were coming out of their factories. A lot of companies were dumping their waste products into rivers and waterways, and it kept goods cheap, right? The positive is it keeps goods cheap because now businesses don't have to spend a whole lot of money and time, getting rid of stuff. However, eventually we get to the point where pollution becomes a problem, and we also saw earlier in the 1900s the formation of like monopolies, right? And so the government regulates against monopolies too, to maintain that competition, to be able to maintain that that drive to be better than someone else, rather than simply just having one big monopolist that controls a whole lot of stuff. Okay, so they are able to break up monopolies in certain cases. All righty. All right, the next two are kind of the opposites of economic freedom. And especially if you want to talk about distributing income to people. Okay, so we'll talk about them in order here. So, economic equity, this is promoting equal opportunities to citizens. Some economies might define that as like saying, "Hey, listen, we're going to redistribute income to people, and so like we're going to tax the rich at a real high percentage, and then redistribute that money to the lower income group of people." The United States does that to an extent, right? We have different welfare programs, different food assistance programs, different things that are meant to sustain some type of living for people that don't earn enough money. Okay, so we do have some of that. Other countries are probably a little bit more um, liberal with how much money they give people and how high they tax the people that get taxed. Um, but again, if that is something that we want to promote, right, in terms of financial earnings, that is one way to do it. In the United States, we're probably going to promote that we have economic equity as the fact that everybody has access to public school. Through that access to public school, that they are able to better themselves, et cetera, et cetera. That again, if you work hard, you're going to be able to be successful, and we know that it's not a perfect system. Not every school is exactly the same. The people in school A might be, a little bit disadvantageous from people at school B or C or whatever. We know that every high school is not the same, but that is how the United States would say, "Hey, listen, it's a pretty equal place. We have, discrimination laws and those types of things." That's how we generally promote it, rather than redistributing a whole bunch of income. Okay. Now, if we get to the point of like pure socialism or pure communism where everybody's kind of equal incomes, well, the winners may not benefit enough, and the winners meaning like the high income earners, and the low income earners may benefit too much. And so again, that idea going back to like economic freedom, what can I do with my money? Well, if I get taxed all of my money, and I have a high income, for example, being a doctor, something that's extremely important that people really demand. Well, if they tax all my money, then I'm not going to necessarily be as willing to be a doctor, right? And so the people that don't do good jobs, whatever that might be, they may benefit too much, right? And they may get rewarded for not working as hard or not doing as good of a job. Economic security. This is the idea of taking care of people that can't take care of themselves. Extremely similar to economic equity, depending on how it's conducted. Now, in the United States, we have to qualify for economic security. And what I mean by that is something has to happen. I have to become too old. I have to be too young to be able to support myself. I have to get injured, maybe sick. And we also have the group of people that may not earn enough money with the current job that they have. And so the economic security distributes income to those people based on those scenarios. Okay, now the challenge is, right, is that it raises taxes, and we also know this group of people, um, they are able to, in some cases, take advantage of the system. We hear about stuff in the news all the time that somebody's running some social security scam or unemployment insurance scam or whatever. Now, hopefully, those are small, isolated things, and that the programs that are being implemented are way more effective than kind of what they get credit for. But there are some, like we said, the system is far from perfect. People are able to take advantage in some cases. But again, if this is what it's referred to as when we take care of this group of people. And like I said, taking care is redistributing income. Difference between economic equity and security. This would be economic equity financially, taking care of a bigger group of people, right? I have to qualify for economic security based on these factors here. I'd throw unemployed in there too if I lost my job for a period of time. That's probably a little bit more common one to understand. Okay, the last two, economic stability and growth. Now, I am going to say that stability is probably the most important characteristic of an economy. Not to say that you have to agree with me, but read kind of through what economic stability represents. So, economic stability is the idea that I know that I'm going to have a job tomorrow. I know how much I have to pay on bills. It's pretty straightforward. Like my house payment's the same, my car payment's the same, my car insurance is the same, electric, cable, gas, whatever that is, even gas prices. Okay. Um, that stays stable. I know how much I'm going to have to spend on stuff. Now, to kind of give you the opposite, right? When we hear about gas prices going up, so if we were to tell you that like gas prices were going to go up by $2 in the next month, so we'd have to be like, uh-oh, that's not good. And in our brain, we would say, well, that means I'm going to have to spend a whole lot more money on gas. Well, that might mean a few things. Thing number one, it might mean that I'm not going to spend money on other stuff. Well, that hurts other people's incomes. Okay, so that's not good. It creates a lack of flow of money through the economy. Okay. It also means that I may not necessarily trust what's going on, right? So, like, well, I don't really know what's going to go on. I'm going to stop spending money right now. Obviously, that creates that lack of flow through the economy, and it creates situations where people's incomes decrease. Okay, now the United States government does do some things to create stability. So, for example, the during COVID, the government has dispersed several different payments. Well, three different payments to individuals that are below a certain income. What they're trying to do is they're trying to promote this idea of stability, right? The government's going to give you some money if something bad goes wrong. So you are able to spend that and sustain some type of living, have some confidence in what's going on. Now, that's going to, all right, do one of two things. It's either going to eventually raise our taxes or increase our debt. Okay, so there are some negatives to it. The positives are is that people are a little bit more confident. It keeps people's jobs, right? The people that get that money, they get jobs or they keep their jobs and still earn an income. And again, have that confidence that they are, uh, going to earn a paycheck from week to week, month to month. All right. The last one is economic growth. Um, Again, we want to be able to allow our economy to grow, kind of tied in with economic freedom, probably economic stability as well. Our population grows. As our population grows, more people are working. Um, it could get to the point where I guess you could say, grow too fast to sustain. Um, the government can do certain things to slow that down a little bit with taxes and interest rates, but we grew too fast back in the 1920s. That's a little bit of a different topic for a different day, but we were in such a rush to produce a whole bunch of stuff through the 1920s that we overproduced, and it created a problem leading into the Great Depression. So those are the economic goals. Again, make sure you're staying on pace here. Make sure you get all your assignments done. The next time you have work to do after your little chapter 2 reading assignment will be the exam. So email me with questions and we'll get you set up.